tough to be a Knowles fan going all the way to Ireland to see them lose on a last-second field goal to the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. What was that like? Jeff will tell us at 2:30. We've also got the mixtape. But we will start with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And, Zach, we spoke about some of the cuts yesterday on the program. We knew that there was more that needed to be happened. We were wondering how far along we would get by noon today. How many more cuts would need to be made? Well, the answer is 0, because by the time practice started today, the Buccaneers knew who their 53 men were to compile or to make up the roster for the 2024 season, at least to start for week 1. And, I kudos to the Buccaneers for having a clear, concise plan and getting it done.
Yeah, and I think this is just indicative of what we've watched all preseason, all camp from this squad. I mean, we've talked about, and this theme might change depending on if they lose or win against the Commanders in week 1. But in terms of after the signings were done up into the draft and where we're at now, it's been mostly drama-free. And every time we start to think like there might be a little bit of, what's going to go on? Like Mike Evans signs before free agency starts, right? Like Baker gets the deal done. He's back. Antoine Winfield gets his deal, before we get to actual camp. Tristan Wirfs, his holdout was a hold in, and he actually practiced before the new deal was done. And that was done pretty quickly after the actual padded practices came around. So like the Bucs continually have been ahead of things that are, done behind the scenes on paper, not the actual football part. But it's because of how together they've been on the football side of things. And again, I don't know how much this cohesiveness, this lack of drama will necessarily translate into wins, but I love it. I mean, it's not great for us. It's not great sports radio content. It's not great fodder for the people that cover the team and fans to chat about before actual games are played. But it really is a team that's at peace and on the same page. And again, you give credit to guys like Jason Light, Todd Bowles, and just the entire organization. I don't know how many squads around the National Football League are in this type of place to the level that the Bucs are in terms of, again, just a drama-free, football-focused environment.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think Rick Stroud hit the nail on the head when he tweeted this out at about 8:30 last night when everything was done. Just listen to the impact of what these cuts have, or just listen to the impact of the draft classes that Jason Light has had the last couple of years. And again, this is Rick Stroud, Tampa Bay Times, at NFL Stroud. Bucs have already reached a 53-man player limit, and all their 2024 draft picks have made it. In fact, 22 of the 23 players they've drafted over the past 3 years are on the team, and 26 of 30 over the last 4 years. All starters except Baker Mayfield and Ben Bredeson were drafted by the Buccaneers. And I know somebody said it to Aaron earlier today, but there is no way that this is a bad thing. Not a chance. Because not only are you drafting these players, but you're developing them and you're still winning division titles. So that means your scouting department is doing a great job. Your coaches are doing a great job. And these players are performing at a high level. So for all the smack and all the crap that Jason Light gets for some of the picks he's made in the past, Zach, he has absolutely been on a heater the last couple of drafts, and that doesn't even include the undrafted free agents either.
No, it doesn't. I mean, he's just been doing a great job. And, we talked a little bit about Jason towards the beginning of camp, and it was more so about, I think, bringing the guys back like Evans and Baker. And we talked a little bit about the draft. How can you not when you're having a conversation about GMs and the National Football League? But I think specifically the thing that I always go back to with Jason and where he's at now as a general manager for the Bucs and where he was at, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, is that because he's been able to stay around as long as he has, he's been able to learn. And I don't know how many GMs, stick around. I got to go back and look. Is he the longest or one of the longest tenured GMs in the league right now?
It's got to be one of the longest, yeah.
Right? So I think we talk about this a lot with quarterbacks and how, we're impatient. And how, even with head coaches, the turnover can be pretty quick if they're not winning right away. And that also is applicable to general managers. We don't talk about it as much. And look, Jason had some really bad misses. I don't think that Jameis Winston is an indictment on Jason Light. I've said it yet. I even said it this week. I say it all the time. That's one of those picks where, you can say whatever you want about hindsight. Jameis Winston was the right pick.
If you needed a quarterback at that time, everybody was taking Jameis. People could say, I would have taken Marcus Mariota. All right, fine. And you look at where his career is right now. They're both backups in the league, but
right.
Nobody said, I can't believe the Buccaneers picked Jameis Winston with the number 1 overall pick. They needed a quarterback. He just did what he did at Florida State, leading them to a championship a couple years before. I'm with you. And that was the pick they had to make.
But I bring it up because people do often say that you're tied to those types of quarterback picks. If they sink, you typically do along with it. And you could argue that the fact that Tom Brady came to downtown having a lot to do with Jason Light having brought in Bruce Arians, like you follow the dots, and Tom Brady never gets here if Bruce isn't here. Bruce isn't here if Jason's not here. So even though Jameis didn't work out, you have to give a lot of the Brady era credit and Brady coming to town in general to a guy like Jason Light. But there were other picks and other misses in that first few years that Jason Light was with the Bucs. There also was guys like Mike Evans, who obviously is still around, the exception, not the rule. But again, the bigger picture here, and the reason I bring all of it up, is because Jason then versus Jason now, like he's a much better drafter. And you would expect him to be. If somebody's on the job for a year and then, it's 3 years and it's 5 years and it's getting closer to 10 years, you should be better at that job as you get closer to the decade mark than you were your first year. I think with Jason Light, we're seeing a lot of that reward now in the draft classes, in the moves he makes, both in free agency and with the guys on the team coming back. I think he's grown, and I think he should get credit for that.
Isn't it ironic that when you look at the three of the leaders of this team, how they all have learned from their mistakes in the past and have corrected them? Look at Jason Light, look at Todd Bowles, and look at Baker Mayfield. Three guys that have a little bit of kind of that like redemption story to them. And we all can see that Todd Bowles just looks like a different dude right now. He looks at ease. He's got his coaching staff in place. He loves working with a guy like Liam Cohen. He's got his type of defenders. He drafted a guy in Tyke Smith that is just a Todd Bowles type of guy. And then look at Baker Mayfield. Comfortable here in the Tampa Bay area. He's got a slew of weapons. He's respected. He's wanted. He's loved. He's got a young family now. There's just those three guys. You look at Jason Light, Todd Bowles, and Baker Mayfield. They're all flying high heading into the 2024 season. Yeah,
as they should be. And I think last year, we didn't know if it was going to work out, and I know obviously you were, and I will continue to give you credit, more optimistic than many of us, myself included. I thought that, 3 wins sounded crazy, but I think I had them as low as 5. I said the floor for that Bucs team last year was 5 wins. Certainly they smashed that, and I don't think their ceiling I had much higher than 7, but I digress, as I love to do on this show. I bring it up because last year we talked about how Baker, Todd, and even Jason to an extent, but separated by a little bit, were like tied together as guys that were back against the wall guys. It's probably Todd's last chance to be a head coach if it didn't work out. Baker's last shot to be a franchise quarterback. And again, there was more leeway with a guy at the general manager spot like Jason Light because of all that dead cap, Jay. And we knew that he might have a longer leash even if last season went south because he had to just slice and dice a ton of money. And they're in a great cap space now, about $20 million to work with after it all. But I think even Jason, to an extent, like feels that kind of like back against the wall underdog role. And we see it. He keeps receipts. He brings it up, whether it's to us on a local level or even on a national level when he sees guys like, yeah, you thought I sucked or you think I didn't do this. Like he remembers. And that's the way that he approaches it. And it comes down the pike. Well, now you have a year ahead of time from where we were at last camp and all that. And those guys being like, oh, well now, and I know we've talked about the underdog role a lot, but now you have some success under your belt. And I think they're still very much on the same page of like trying to prove the doubters wrong. But I think that at least now there's something on the resume from 2023 where we're saying, hey, they can do it. 44, and this is from our pal Greg Allman, who's going to join us tomorrow on the show. 44 of the Buccaneers' 53 players were either drafted by Tampa Bay or started there as an undrafted rookie. And that's something that really has been the bread and butter of a team like the Green Bay Packers. You don't see Green Bay really go outside, right? They don't make a ton of free agent signings. I remember this stat from Thursday night or Monday Night Football years ago when there was, I think, 1 or 2 people on the Packers that were not drafted there. And I think one was like Julius Peppers. It was nuts. But just let's give you the 53-man roster. We'll go through it real quick. Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask, those are your 2 quarterbacks. John Wolford gets cut. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets brought back on the practice squad. You neither, right? Yeah, cosign.
Yeah, Rashad White, Bucky Irving, and Sean Tucker. No surprise there as the 3 running backs.
But we do know that Chase Edmonds done for the year now.
Done for the year.
Which is a little different
with a knee injury. So, yeah, and I think this is the next 3 positions, starting with the running back. That is where there was a little bit of, all right, what kind of numbers are we going to be throwing at these 3 spots? Wide receivers, we've been talking all camp long that they're probably going to keep 6 because Liam Cohen loves the 3 wide receiver sets. However, the Buccaneers only kept 5. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Jalen McMillan, Trey Palmer, and Cam Johnson. Tight ends, we were thinking, could they keep 2? maybe 3. They can't keep 4. That's exactly what they did. K-Dot and Payne Durham, Devin Culp, Keith. More surprising that they kept 5 receivers or 4 tight ends?
4 tight ends. 4 tight ends. 4 tight ends. I just, like, at least at the receiver, you're so strong, right? Like, you're so strong.
Yeah, but if that's the case, they only kept 5 of them, though.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying, though, is you don't necessarily need to sorry, I don't know what I'm trying to say here. I'm shocked that they kept the 4 tight ends, because I think if you would ask me at the beginning of camp, the conversation would have been different. But over the last week-ish, you started to hear like, oh, maybe Keith doesn't make it, right? Like Devin Culp was a 7th rounder. Like, how does he come into the mix? I didn't see that happening. I didn't see that as the game plan the Bucs were going to have.
It's funny because I actually felt the opposite. I felt there was more of a possibility for the tight ends because of what Devin Culp was able to do down the stretch. And every single time I kept asking somebody about Keith, they were like, yeah, he's probably going to make the roster. I mean, who else does what he does? And I'm like, all right, well, you keep 4 tight ends then? And they're like, I don't think so. And then it happened.
It was the least confident, like,
it happened.
Yeah, they're going to keep 4 that I've ever heard.
But you just look at this. The 5 wide receivers they kept, we knew the 4. And Cameron Johnson is a guy that's been coming on as of late. Everybody loves this guy. He's fast as hell. And the tight ends, there's nothing that Devin Culp did in training camp that shows you that he's not ready. Like, he's not going to play a ton, but special teams guy, is he going to get in there and block? I think he's going to get every opportunity to do so. But when I saw this come out, it brought me back to the conversation that we had about 2 weeks ago, Zach, when we spoke about Liam Cohen as an offensive coordinator. And everybody keeps saying what? Liam Cohen is a disciple of Sean McVay. And everybody wants to look at what Liam Cohen did at Kentucky and what happened with the Rams and how often they use Tyler Higbee, right? We keep looking back at his past spots and saying, all right, well, how is the Buccaneers offense going to look like? But you and I had this discussion. I haven't really heard many other people have it. What's the Liam Cohen wrinkle? What's the Liam Cohen aspect to this offense that is different than what we saw at Kentucky, different than what we saw from Sean McVay? And the one thing is getting the tight ends involved more than what he possibly has done in other places. And when you keep 4 tight ends, what that tells me is that these guys are going to be involved in the offense. Yes, they're going to play 3 wide receivers. You're going to see a ton of Jalen McMillan and Trey Palmer with Godwin and Evans. But, Zach, if you're focused on running the football and playing with 2 tight end sets, you're going to see more K-Dot and Payne Durham on the field together. You're going to see Devin Culp get some opportunities. And I like that. I like that Liam Cohen is looking at a position and going, hey, man, we got four guys that can contribute to this team. Let's rock with it. Let's rock with those guys. Let's keep a draft pick in-house. I'm excited because I think as much as we think we know what the offense is going to look like, I still think there's parts of it that even Sean McVay's offense is going to be different than this one.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's identical. And we've seen the McVay tree reach even beyond a guy like Liam Cohen. Like, I would have to go and look, but I don't know if some of the other branches of that tree are identical. I'm sure they've all added their own wrinkles.
Yeah, but I think that when you look at this, like, let's look at the Zach Taylor offense, right?
That's where I was going to go,
in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Like, they're very similar to what LA did.
That's why I didn't give you an example, because he was the first guy that came to mind. That I was
like, that's not an example.
Yeah.
But they're very similar. Like, do they really use the tight ends as much? No, like, they're big, heavy wide receiver sets.
Yeah.
You know, obviously with the 3-headed monster there for a while with Chase Higgins and Boyd. And you kind of saw that last year, too, with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. That was always your goal, even when Bobby Woods was there, Odell Beckham Jr. was there. But now that Liam Cohen's here, he's like, all right, that's cool. We still have those guys, but we're going to actually incorporate more of the tight ends into the offense. And I think that helps because of one reason, Baker Mayfield. Cut down those throws, more simple throws, get the ball in the hands of guys like K-Dot and Early. Man, it's just, there seems like a lot of things these guys are doing. I'm like, I'm on board with that. I'm on board with that. I'm on board with that.
Yeah, I'm with you. And a couple of things here. I misspoke earlier when you said wide receivers or tight ends. I was surprised to see them keep 4 tight ends. It wasn't that I wasn't also surprised to see them keep as little amount of the receivers as they did. A good point here in the Bartow 4DA text line from the 404. They're essentially going to be looking at Devin Culp as more of a pass catcher. It says wide receiver there, but as a pass catcher than like a tight end. And that might be what it came down to. Is like we like Devin Culp as a pass catcher more than we do maybe the 6th, 7th, or 8th receiver that we could keep.
It's him over Cody Thompson and Ryan Miller, right?
That's what it comes down to.
So he's giving you a guy that's a little bit of a bigger body. He can. It sucks too because I think you try to find a way to get Cody Thompson on this roster. He's not afraid to throw his body out there and block. He made more catches than anybody in the preseason. I think he had 15, led the NFL.
Yep.
He'd be a great practice squad candidate. You still have Rakim Jarrett as a possibility after he comes off of IR. What is it, week 4, week 5?
You got to miss 4 games.
You got to miss 4 games, so week 5. But, yeah, I think Devin Culp, he is going to be used more in a pass catcher type role, but he is a little bit of a project, too. When you look at it as, hey, can we kind of round him out? Can we round him out to be a little bit more of a blocker? Because I think you're going to need some help if that guy lines up on the end of the offensive line as well.
Yeah, and I think that seemingly was their line of thinking. It seems like that's why the Bucs went that direction. Back to the McVay point you were making, Jay, not to kind of keep jumping around here, trying to keep up with you here. You mentioned how his offense could be similar but different at his own wrinkle. And Warren Sharp at sharpfootball.com, huge into the analytics. I just had this tweet before we went on air. Usage of 3 wide receiver sets this preseason. The LA Rams, shocking, were at 99%. So literally almost every play. The Atlanta Falcons, who's their OC? Zach Robinson. Who was where before Atlanta? In LA.
The Rams, yeah.
So 94% of the time, the Atlanta Falcons use a 3 wide receiver set. Now, here in Tampa Bay, we were third. But there's a drop-off 83% of the time. So to your point, just to kind of give it some more even fire, very similar to the Rams and Falcons, who is Sean McVay and is a Sean McVay disciple. And still showing that they're similar because, again, Liam Cohen does take a lot from what he did with McVay. But to go from a 99% usage to an 83% usage, that's the wrinkle. What's he doing with the rest of that 16%? Quick math.
That a boy.
What's Liam Cohen? Quote me on that. If the math is right, can you double check? 16% difference, though. What's Liam Cohen doing with the rest of that 16%? That's the difference. That's the wrinkle.
From the 404, Keith's a special teams machine. Doesn't matter what position he is on the official roster. 1,000%. We said that, I think, last year. It was like, Coach Keith, just don't throw him the football in 2 of the 3 first plays, and I think he'll be fine. Who cares if he's just...
Should have put him as a fullback, just because.
Yes.
Then he would have been eligible. There's only like 3 fullbacks in the league you got to compete with.
They should literally just name his position Co. Just KO. Put him on there. Knock people out. Not a surprise about the defensive line. Vita Vea, Kalijah Cansey, Logan Hall, Greg Gaines, Will Golston. And we talked about Ernest Brown yesterday. CJ Brewer was coming on strong. We thought there was a possibility there. These 6 guys at the outside linebacker position look a lot better, I think, now than they did to start the preseason. Yaya Diaby, Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, Chris Braswell, Anthony Nelson, Marquise Watts, and Jose Ramirez. No surprise with the 4 interior linebackers, Levante David, KJ Britt, Servassier Dennis, and JJ Russell. Corners, Jamel Dean, Zion McCollum, Bryce Hall, Josh Hayes, Tyreek Funderburk. And then to round it out, the rest of the secondary, Tyke Smith, Christian Izzy, and Tavier Thomas, Antoine Winfield Jr., Jordan Whitehead, who practiced today in full, and Kayvon Merriweather. No surprise, Chase McLaughlin, Jake Camarda, and not Zach Triner, Evan Deckers.
Boo.
Is he your least favorite?
Yeah. I'm telling you what, the second I sniff...
I'm out for you.
The second I sniff a long snap that feels like a short snap, we start pounding the podium for Zach Triner to come back.
You better text him.
He's
one of those... You did? What did he say?
He said...
who is this, Laser?
He said, give me a second. I got to catch my breath. I'm pretty emotional right now. There's a lot of the Bucs media. You see Greg Allman was sharing like snippets and stories. I'm not the only one that's emotional about Zach Triner not being a part of this team, Jay. Yeah. It's a problem. And listen, for all the great moves that Jason Light and Todd Bowles have made these last couple of years, we're going to have to talk about the long snapper position.
Send them over to the Green Bay Zackers. It'll be fine. But I don't think there was many real surprises on the defense either, to be honest.
No, I agree with you. And again, I think collectively you look at the 2 last draft classes plus some undrafted guys making the roster. Jose Ramirez, one of them. You want to talk about guys that balled this preseason and really found a way to make a name for themselves. Not that Jose's new. Look, I'll even give credit. There were some listeners that even at the beginning of camp were like, watch out for Jose Ramirez. I don't know where y'all came up with that, but you nailed it.
They were there.
He was worth watching.
They were there. And shout out to Greg Allman again, mentioning injury updates from practice today. Servassier Dennis and Justin School practicing again, which is great. Still no Yaya Diaby, Jordan Whitehead, or Kayvon Merriweather, but they all should be able to practice next week. We'll continue the Buccaneers conversation at 1:45 and then at 2 o'clock with Matt Matera. But when we come